Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We've got a great show lined up for you today. We've got J.J. Carroll. He is the author of Treason, the Biden administration's strategic and malicious destruction of America's sovereignty. We're going to be talking about the border, Trump 2.0, and so much more. You're not going to want to miss it. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. And we are back. JJ, thank you so much for joining us. Now, for my audience who may not be familiar with your background, can we start with that and why you decided to write this book?
Sure. I did 24 years in the United States Border Patrol in San Diego sector, and I rose up the ranks from a journeyman agent to a senior leader in the United States Border Patrol. I worked the most dangerous part of the border is Tijuana during the most violent time in recent Border Patrol history. I rose up the ranks and became a deputy patrol agent in charge in my final year in my career. And my final year in my career was Joe Biden's first year in his 4-year term. So I witnessed the genesis of the treason. I witnessed everything that was unconstitutional happening right before my eyes. And I witnessed Mayorkas push down Biden's 94 executive orders, just obliterating the border as we knew it under Donald Trump, which was the greatest border president in the history of the United States of America. And then we watched systematically over the next 4 years have the border completely destroyed. And I believe it was done, and I can prove it. It was done intentionally, strategically, and on purpose. And I wrote a book about it 2 years ago called Invaded, became a bestseller. I just finished this book at the end, second week in January. So everything that if you read my book, everything that I wrote is actually being validated right now by DOJ and by Donald Trump's executive orders, and is a bestseller on Amazon as well. I know that treason is a very strong word, but I don't back down of it. I took a lot of prayer and a lot of thought to how I'm going to write this book, and there is no other explanation except treason.
Over the last, I would say it extends beyond the steal of the Trump presidency the second time around. We've had a lot of treasonous activity. Like you said, right now with the veil kind of being lifted on USAID and the funding of so many of these programs, and how even Soros himself was able to set up NGOs, non-governmental organizations, through these that he really didn't even have to spend a dime on, is starting to show people how this has worked for such a very, very long time. Now, outside of Biden and his administration, this really does mean that we've had treasonous individuals embedded in, you could call it the executive, you could call it the bureaucracy, you could call it the deep state, whatever, for a very, very long time. When you look at that aspect, what has to be the criminal accountability? Because obviously the border issue was one that was really right in your face. First, they denied it was happening. Then when there were videos of planes literally flying these people around, they still denied it was happening. It wasn't until it started to get into commercial airports everywhere. And when I was flying, my flights were being held up to bring illegals on that had packets. And by that time, all of a sudden they had to admit it was happening. But now it was a crisis and they're going to figure it out. As if they didn't know from the get-go. You saw the funding of people having homes for 2 years without having to get a job. They denied that. That got exposed. FEMA tried to send another $80 million into New York City, even after they were told to halt that. FEMA denied that they were involved in this process, while people in North Carolina and Hawaii suffered. Well, they got $700 checks. Meanwhile, they're doling out hundreds of millions of dollars. And I bet you if you lifted the veil over the last couple decades, it might even be billions. So how do we get criminal accountability, and where do we start?
Well, I think everything hinges on the NGOs. And when you begin to understand that the federal government, the way they launder their money is through the non-governmental organizations. DOJ is now uncovering that through USAID. You have other people that are coming out digging into the behind the scenes, if you will, and they're saying, oh, this is how they're doing this. I argue this for quite a while now. I'm on the same retirement system as all of the senators and congressmen. However, when those senators and congressmen finish their 20 years in service, the same way I did in 24 years in the United States Border Patrol, they came out, some of them were tens of millions to $250 million. That's not just insider trading. That means you have to be fraudulently taking bribes from foreign nationals or people within the federal government. So everything is incestuous. So when Doge says, okay, I found the person that sent $20 billion to, say, FEMA for all the NGOs, somebody had to accept that. So now I have 2 points of contact. I have the actual evidence of the criminality, which is the money, and then I have the guy or girl receiving it now scattering to the NGOs. All of those people need to be brought in. You do something that we did all the time when we had big narcotic seizures or major human smuggling arrests. I'd bring in the people that were involved in it, separate them, and say, who wants to talk first? And I let them all see all the other rooms, all we call it hard cells. All the other hard cells are filled, and all of my guys are going to talk to these people. Who's going to break first? Criminals have no loyalty, no allegiance. All they care about is themselves. So you do that with the Clintons. You do that with the Bidens and the Obamas. And you do that with Mayorkas. You do it with all of these people and the Republicans as well. And you put them in cells and you let them see everybody. Look, I'm just going to show you a camera. This is what's happening live. Somebody's going to talk. You know someone's going to talk. So who's going to talk first? That's how you get accountability. But I'm going to tell you something, Jason. Time is ticking. I'm tired of hearing about Jeffrey Epstein. I'm tired of hearing about 9/11. I'm tired of hearing about the moon landing. I want to see the evidence, and I don't want the federal government to include Donald Trump giving me a Congresswoman Luna to review the stuff before they give it to me. I don't want the government touching anything. And if you believe the government is for you, you're a fool. They're against you. The government is evil.
So you just named 3 things that's going to take this interview in a totally different direction now. 9/11, Epstein, and I always go beyond the moon landing. I really get into NASA because the Apollo stuff is kind of important, but the truth of the matter is that NASA is integral in our military-industrial complex and coupled with DARPA on so many projects, including the founding of Google. For those that don't know, the initial founding and funding was through the National Library Initiative, which was to digitize all the information in the world. And Larry Page and Sergey Brin got that initial funding through NASA and DARPA with their algorithm. Remember, ARPA, the precursor to DARPA, are the ones that actually created the internet. Now, you mentioned Jeffrey Epstein. I knew we were not getting anything. Everybody, as soon as I saw that interview, and I've been covering this now since the Palm Beach arrest. I've been doing this almost 20 years. You mentioned 9/11. I'm one of the guys behind the Loose Change film that went mega viral and questioned the event. When I saw the other woman, Bondi, on Jesse Waters, saying not only earlier in the week that she had the files on her desk, I was extremely skeptical. And then when she said out of nowhere on Jesse Waters that we were going to see something within the next 24 hours, again, extremely skeptical. Now, I am that guy that was on courtlistener.com literally downloading files, not just in this last dump, because the last dump was garbage. Really, the 2017 to 2019 dumps had a lot of stuff there. There is no Epstein client list because he wasn't selling girls. He was utilizing them to compromise people and then kind of pawning them off in this network that also involved arms dealing. And that's another reason that we're probably never going to see the reality behind this. Yes, blackmail. Yes, Israel. But the United States as well. More than likely, European intelligence. You look at Ghislaine Maxwell's father. Robert Maxwell was involved with Israeli intelligence, British intelligence, Russian intelligence. Went down the line. And really, when you look at the Epstein case, there's video. We already, in that New York raid, we got our eyes on hard drives, on
Yep.
binders that had the sides blocked out, and on burned CDs and DVDs that were confirmed to have child pornography on them by the agents. Period. Full stop. So what we have is not a list of individuals that bought girls from Jeffrey Epstein or were going to the island to have sex. No, they were going for other reasons and then compromised through these things. Guys like Prince Andrew, for instance, he was the UK's arms dealer, everybody. He was literally the one cutting billions of dollars in arms deals. I'm not sure if you caught this, but Louis Black, the comedian, when that last dump came around, talked about his one time he met Epstein in his mansion in New York City at a dinner party. And Epstein brought him into a room. He had a whiteboard up, asked Louis Black what he thought this was. No idea. He goes, these are Israeli defense minister plans for weapon systems that I was going over with him last night. Again, the guy was an arms dealer. He had connections to Adnan Khashoggi all the way back in the 80s. You look at the passport they found with a Saudi Arabian identity. We never got justice for Iran-Contra, JJ. So all those other things, I think they intertwine, right? I think that's the last time the veil was lifted and we actually had criminal accountability, the kind you're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. They were mostly slap on the wrists. People got commuted and pardoned. And the guy they made the face of it, Oliver North, got book deals in TV shows and became a millionaire. This didn't really discourage that behavior. So when we look at, I'm with you 1,000%. I want to see the declassification come all the way down. You mentioned 9/11. Mm-hmm. I got Kurt Weldon coming on tomorrow. We're going to be talking Able Danger. That's just one small aspect of 9/11. Doesn't the beginning have to be with all these things, mass declassification, unless, not at the criminal level, it actually impedes our national security in the sense that it's giving away active agents, active security protocol, active technology. Otherwise, we've got to get all this stuff because we're not children. We can't be lied to. And we should know what our government's been up to. Like you said, there are aspects of this thing that are extremely evil. And I know I went on a huge rant there, but I'd like to get your take.
You're absolutely correct. And everything that we're talking about is interconnected. I don't believe in things happen in a vacuum. They're all connected. Absolutely. All of this is all about power, money. That's it. Gorging themselves on power and money and running basically a new world order government. And I know people laugh and they say, "Oh, that's crazy." And my retort back to them is, "You're so grossly ignorant. You're just an ostrich sticking your head in the sand. There are no more conspiracy theorists. Everything has come out. It's all real, but they're still hiding so much." And I believe nothing will happen in America. We will never change. We'll just continue to hurtle down this path of destruction if we don't show everything. Like, I want Donald Trump to go, "I'm all in. Here you go. Here's everything," and not give it to Luna or Pam Bondi. I give it to the internet. Just give it to the internet and allow the investigative journalists to dig into it, and we'll find the people, and then then that's where the rubber meets the road. Because we're in the age of awakening now. Well, if this is a big if we get the information, we'll be in the age of reckoning, meaning America is going to have to make a solid decision. Are we going to go and punish these people, or are we just going to let it all no, don't worry about it? And I think America might do that.
Well, in the Epstein case in particular, also what I point out to people, and what, again, other than the arms dealing thing, which everybody seems to be ignorant of, we have names of other co-conspirators. It's not like they're not out there. For instance, they don't get that 2007, 2008 case, it wasn't just Epstein and Maxwell that were shielded. There were other co-conspirators that were supposed to not be prosecuted, the non-prosecution agreement, that Acosta was a part of, and allegedly was told Epstein was intelligence and it was beyond his pay grade. I'm going to name those people. For those people that still don't know, Sarah Kellen is out there. Leslie Groff is out there. Haley Robinson is out there. And then probably the one I'm the most sympathetic to, Nadia Marcinko, a.k.a. Nadia Marcinkova, is also out there. Now, for those that don't know, in the documents, Marcinko was allegedly bought from her parents in Yugoslavia as a 14-year-old girl by Epstein and groomed into that position. So, with somebody like that, I can understand, survival is a part of it, and you're not initially a criminal. and I can let that pass. So that would probably be my star witness, right? And she gets a pass no matter what. But let's talk to these other people because they're the ones that were around and surrounded by these people of power. In fact, Sarah Kellen and others were married off to them after the fact. You look at Glenn Dubin's wife, another name that we know. She dated Epstein prior. All of this went through Epstein, and I think that's what people don't understand is we already have names, we already have flight logs, we already have an investigation in Florida that they held so much back from. We already have an FBI that compromised him at the very least as an informant. Okay? So that's where you start. You don't start with an imaginary list. The book is Treason, the Biden administration's strategic and malicious destruction of America's sovereignty. You can get it on Amazon.com right now. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back with J.J. Carroll after this. Hey, everybody. Jason Bermas here. And it's with somewhat of a heavy heart that I come to you with the news that Making Sense of the Madness is changing and will hopefully be staying alive in some form. If you followed my work, you know that I've always said I am extremely lucky whenever I have a paid gig. Well, after 3 years, I no longer have any paid gigs. So when you look at Making Sense of the Madness, the format is going to change where you're going to be able to watch a more commentary-driven show live on my socials, YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin, and X first and live, and then it will be carried by Patriot.tv. Now, unfortunately, this is going to mean that some of the very high caliber guests that I've gotten in the past will no longer be joining us. And once again, the format is changing. We are hoping that there is somebody out there that wants to sponsor the show and bring it back until its full form. But until then, please consider the links down below if you're watching this live or over on my socials. Thank you so much. And we are back. So I went on a rampage on Epstein there. 9/11. That's the real rampage for me. And that's not only because of all the lives lost overseas or what was done here domestically. It is the entire reshaping of our foreign and domestic policy over the past 2+ decades under the narrative they sold us that evil Muslims in caves hated our freedom so much they took box cutters, hijacked planes, and rammed them into buildings. When you look at that event, it's not just the Patriot Act, Military Commissions Act, National Defense Authorization Act, Homeland Security, fusion centers. We now have a program for over a decade plus called signature reduction that's not even on the books. That's domestic surveillance and military operations in this country. Without getting the truth out about 9/11, how do we repeal and redact those things? Because look, I get it. The Border Patrol has been absorbed by Homeland Security. I like that they put the North Dakota governor in there. Christie's pretty good. You know what I mean? I think Tom Homan's good. They're getting the job done. But I would argue under Homeland Security, the border only got worse over time. You know what I mean? It's not like it improved. And we don't need Deutschland security. So when we look at all of the things that have happened post 9/11 via justification for 9/11, how do we repeal those things?
I think you're going to have to go and do what Donald Trump is doing. You're going to have to systematically rip everything to its ground, to the foundation, burn it and scatter it across our globe. I think what Donald Trump needs to do is go through systematically Department of Education, energy, DHS, all that stuff, figure out what you need, what needs to be brought down, and then scatter it across the nation so you don't have a centralized power. Look, you mentioned this DHS. I lived it, man. I was there when DHS was created. And guess what happened? Border security got worse. Since the creation of DHS, I lived it. It was worse. We became less effective. We became more impotent. We became more policy stricken. We became more under the thumb of politicians. I worked under 5 presidential administrations. Only one secured the border. Only one. That was Donald Trump. But I want your audience to realize he didn't do it until the second, almost the 18 months before he left office. Why? Because his own party, the Republican Party, run by Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, sabotaged him all the way to the end. And why I get very adamant about this, my brothers and sisters that I was supervising and myself were down on the border getting rocks shot at, getting fights all the time. Why? Because those bastards in the Republican Party wouldn't fund a stupid wall for $5 billion, but they spent $8 trillion in the Middle East, and they spent over $350 billion for that puppet Zelensky in Ukraine, and nothing for Americans. Nothing. In fact, under Biden, toward the end, he gave approximately $380 million just on a side deal to do what in the Middle East? To secure the border of 4 different nations. And at the same bill, do you know how much money my boys got down on the border? Zero. So if you don't think, with all my experience writing 2 bestsellers and doing documentaries, I'm telling you, without a shadow of a doubt, the federal government is the enemy of the people, period.
So let's talk about that aspect. And I'm glad that you went into it, because I often say that, but obviously I never worked for DHS or border security. Again, the narrative was that we need to secure our borders even more because these Muslim terrorists could be anywhere. We could have sleeper cells come across the border. It came with a color code of fear-mongering.
Yeah.
When you saw what was going on in that transition of the border and you were hearing that rhetoric in the beginning, were you expecting more tools, more money, possibly building a wall? And then when did it become apparent that that was not the case? Because I believe DHS comes into fruition in 2003, somewhere along the same lines as the Iraq invasion, correct?
Correct. So how did I know that this was going to be a boondoggle? I knew it was a boondoggle when I began to see all the lies start to materialize. Like, we're going to secure the border. Wait a minute, I don't see any more money. I don't see new vehicles. I don't see anything. Wait a minute. I lived in San Diego. I'm going from the border where I'm not catching many people because we're pushing them out into the ocean or to the desert. But I'm driving into San Diego and I'm seeing thousands of illegal aliens. And I'm being told, you can't do that, JJ. And then, of course, I would just go do it anyway. But then I had to lie on federal documents of where I arrested people. Can you believe that? I'm forced to fudge the reports because I'm doing my job. And then I saw where I knew the stupidity already started was they broke us away from ICE, created ICE, and then street hired people to do investigations. That's like San Diego Police Department going, you know what? I don't want you 20-year veterans to become homicide detectives. I'm going to street hire someone out of college, out of San Diego State. Come here. Here's your gun and badge. Now you're a homicide detective. You see how absurd that is? You had street hires that were going after narco smugglers and human smugglers that never arrested anybody in their they just came out of college. I knew that this whole thing was a boondoggle, and then I watched systematically from DHS inception. It became a power grab. It became a way to surveil Americans through the Patriot Act. I was for the Patriot Act because I was ignorant and young. But after about a year or two, I started thinking, well, wait a minute. There's a special court that no one knows where, and then you go there, and it's called the FISA court, and then they rubber stamp. Hold on a second. Whoa. That's against the Constitution. Our founding fathers would have already been at war. Not us, not Americans. Americans have been propagandized for my entire adult life. I've been propagandized. Absolutely. So DHS is so big. Do you know there's 250,000 employees in DHS? It's enormous. It needs to be shattered. Does the border need to be secured? Absolutely. No one should cross that border. No one should cross our borders, period. But, Jason, the biggest question, and it always remains since I was in the Border Patrol to this day, what are you doing about the 50 million illegal aliens in our country right now? Because 1,000 to 1,500 arrests a day ain't going to cut it for me, buddy. And why are we? Look, I'm the biggest MAGA. I'm the biggest Tom Homan fan you ever seen. I love that guy. However, I don't need to take 10 people to go arrest one person. You know what I would do? I would encircle the Roosevelt Hotel at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I would systematically drain that hotel of 5,000 people and deport them all in one day. You give J.J. Carroll enough men, I have 5,000. And then the next day, I'm going to go down to a neighborhood called Clinton in New York City that houses 6,000 to 9,000 single adult military-age men from the continent of Africa, Middle East, Venezuela, and Haiti on one city block, not scattered out throughout New York City. One city block, I can arrest 6,000 to 9,000 people in 24 hours. Why is it not being done? It's a big question. It's a legitimate question to ask. And no one wants to answer it because I don't believe that the federal government has the tools, the responsibility, the manpower to do it.
I was going to say the logistics on that sound a little bit tough. Like, no, for those that have never been to New York City, I'm a New York guy. Yeah, I've been to the Roosevelt. I mean, that's a project. You think there are 6,000 people there, so you got to have.
There's 5,000 people in Roosevelt Hotel right now.
So you probably, to get that done, bare minimum, have to have 500 men. I'm not even sure how many vehicles, and then kind of a pathway to either get them to an airport, or you would have to have multiple buses lined up. It's definitely doable. Definitely kind of difficult at the same time, but I totally
understand.
But
Jason,
go ahead.
Okay, let's think of this. We sent 100,000 people over to the Iraq War within what, couple weeks? Mm-hmm. Are you telling me that I can send hundreds of thousands of soldiers over the ocean with all their equipment, all the food supplies, all that, but I can't go and arrest 5,000 illegal alien, illiterate people from third world country?
Well,
I don't believe
I would assume that to do it, you'd probably have to bring in the National Guard. By the way, not that I would be opposed to that. I mean, I think that's
it has to be the National Guard.
Yeah.
This has to be, look, this is a national security. This isn't, hey, we're going to go round up some farm hands, which I'm fine with too. We're talking about 60 to 70% of the 30 million people Joe Biden allowed into our country in 4 years are single adult military-age men. We have the army of the world inside of our country. Are we going to ignore the fact, or are we just going to buckle down and say, let's go do it? The military is on the border. The military has to be assigned to federal agents in order to get this job done. There's no other way around it. If we're going to do 1,000 here and 1,000, get real, man. This ain't never going to happen. And I want your audience to know at least 40 people a day are murdered or killed by illegal aliens. Every single day. I'm not talking about the rapes. I'm not talking about the assaults. I'm not talking about all that. That's in the thousands. I'm just talking about straight killings. And we do nothing about it. Why? Because we do not have the stones to do what's right. Sure, when everybody, all the NGOs and all the politicians become millionaires by going to fight some boogeyman war in the Middle East, but we just crap all over America and Americans, and we just allow the enemy to fester inside of our country. This is a demographic shift from citizens to non-citizens, and when you realize that American women are not even reproducing at the replacement rate, and the illegal aliens that you brought in, I document this in my book, they reproduce at a 2 to 5 times the rate of U.S. citizens. Do the math. It's over in a generation or two, America. You may call yourself a United States of America, but it will not be. You will become the minority in your own country, as Joe Biden predicted when he was a president. And I will quote, that's not a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing, but the people in power don't.
The book is Treason, the Biden administration's strategic and malicious destruction of America's sovereignty. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more J.J. Carroll after this. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and it's with somewhat of a heavy heart that I come to you with the news that Making Sense of the Madness is changing and will hopefully be staying alive in some form. If you followed my work, you know that I've always said I am extremely lucky whenever I have a paid gig. Well, after 3 years, I no longer have any paid gigs. So when you look at Making Sense of the Madness, the format is going to change, where you're going to be able to watch a more commentary-driven show live on my socials, YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin, and X first, and live, and then it will be carried by Patriot.tv. Now, unfortunately, this is going to mean that some of the very high-caliber guests that I've gotten in the past will no longer be joining us. And once again, the format is changing. We are hoping that there is somebody out there that wants to sponsor the show and bring it back until its full form. But until then, please consider the links down below if you're watching this live or over on my socials. Thank you so much. And we are back. Just kind of finishing up on New York alone. Number one, a lot of these people are shipped to the coastline, but at the same time, I'm in the Midwest, I'm in Iowa, but I'm in a satellite city of Chicago, and I saw plenty of people come in through Chicago O'Hare as well. So this certainly is spread out, but they try to get it into these city areas, sanctuary cities in particular. I remember my first run-in with a sanctuary city. It was all the way back in 2008 when I first joined InfoWars and was in Austin, and we were so close to San Antonio. And I quickly realized that the real cowboys were actually the Mexicans, and the only cowboys in Texas were the cocaine cowboys over in Dallas with the big hats and the bolo ties. When you look at New York, I will say this, logistically, although it sounds tough, when you militarize it, it's not as tough. There are plenty of military bases on the East Coast. Number two, there is a large National Guard. Just as you mentioned, all those agencies and the hirings, it reminded me of my friend Kareem, Puerto Rican kid that I grew up with, ended up doing the National Guard thing, ended up going overseas, ended up working for ICE, ended up working for the TSA in all this. And, over time, he was very mainline in the beginning. And then just, after I made the 9/11 documentary, even before then, we had these conversations. He just totally flipped. And he's like, you're 100% right. He's like, when he worked at TSA, he's like, every single time they wanted to sneak something through, they got it through. It's like, no matter what we did, we couldn't keep things from coming through. And that's, again, people don't get that. He would talk about the debacle at the border. Here's somebody who is Hispanic, everybody, Latinx these days is what we're talking about. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Some of these people are hardcore criminal animals. You don't want them here. Has nothing to do with race, okay? How do we hone that into the American people so that there is less resistance to obviously what is the right thing to do in trying to keep our sovereignty? And look, I'm not necessarily against a pathway to citizenship for some. If there are families that have been here for 25 years and actually been paying taxes and not sucking off the system, let's give them the same pathway we would with somebody with a green card and an application. Let them take the test. By now, I'd assume they'd know the language, maybe learn a little bit of the history. Another thing that's always bothered me through this process is one of my good friends was Vietnamese from Vietnam, and she never got her citizenship. She would apply and she had been here since before she was a teenager. We're talking about getting into her early 30s and continuously trying to apply and get it and being unable to. And it sounds insane that is the process. But again, how do we get less resistance from those that are really ignorant? How do we create a pathway for those that have been here for an extremely long time? And how do we normalize a common sense approach to this as we build a wall and secure that border?
We don't need any new laws. We don't need anything. We already have everything in place. Now, you talk about your friend from Vietnam. The reason why your friend from Vietnam can't get citizenship is because the whole system is backlogged because of, quote, the good, hardworking people been here for 20 years. The whole system's broken because we allowed it to break. In order to clean out the country, we have to remove everyone here illegally. Because why we're a nation founded on law and order. Why are we founded on law and order? Because law and order creates stability and safety and stability create opportunities and freedoms. When you have chaos, you have no law and order. You have just chaos, and therefore everything that you desire to maintain, you're in survival mode. So the idea that I have to, as a law enforcement guy, go and make these cutouts for this group's been here this long, this group's here. I've lived that my whole entire life. No, everyone leave. People that are in the system that want to get into America legally get into America. We immigrate legally 1.2 million people a year in America. That's more than all the other nations in the world combined. We do. That's how generous we are. Let me give you an example of what this looks like. in real time because I like to bring it down. What does it look like when someone jumps the line? Well, what's the last movie that I really gave a crap about was Top Gun, right? Top Gun Maverick. So me and my wife and my son are so excited. I go to AMC.com. I get my tickets. Honey, we got the best seats. I'm right there. We're good. We walk in to the theater and there's a line. There's about 10,000 people. And I'm like, holy smokes, thank God I have my ticket. I come up to the cashier and go, here's my tickets. Oh, I'm sorry. All these people already took the seats. No. I paid for it. Here's my ticket. I don't have. No, sir. Move along. You're a racist. You're a bigot. All these people got in there first, and they're destroying the theater so I can never go back in and watch a movie ever again. That's what we've done. We've turned a blind eye through our government and said, come on in. If your house is flooded, do you just take out a little bit of the water or do you take out all of it? Right? It's a fair question. And if you want to, I'm going to warn you, if you start to split hairs and you start to get cutouts here and cutouts there, are you telling me that our government that's corrupt to the core is going to cut away everything and we're going to be right here? We either do what has to be done as Americans or we just half-ass it. Then I don't want to hear any problem. I don't want to hear it. When your wife is raped and your son gets stolen and is a pedophile ring, or your car gets broken in, or your property values devalue to the point you're like, holy cow, I'm underwater. I don't want to hear it. You allowed this to happen. And don't think it doesn't happen. It touches you in every way. I have friends that are going to school now this last school year in tears. And I'm like, what's wrong, man? What's wrong? To their wives. I sent my daughter to school in first grade. There's only 2 other English speakers in the whole class. I said, well, it touches everyone, doesn't it? Right? That I'm just kind of cold that way. It touches everyone, doesn't it? That's how you get Americans to realize, no. You're not exempt from this. We're all going to be affected adversely by the treason of our federal government.
So I'd love to get your take on the repurposing of Gitmo, okay? Now, for me, I hate Guantanamo Bay. I don't like black sites in general, Abu Ghraib, etc. Anything where you're basically taking away due process and transparency, I think is extremely dangerous. You look at who they have at Gitmo right now, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the other 2 9/11. Guys, it's over 20 years. We're talking about military tribunals we have very, very little insight into. People irate that they might not get the death penalty or they might cut a deal. This is 20 plus years. There's no reason this should have been allowed to go on 10 years. I would say 5 would be pushing it. It should have all been transparent with all of this. That's a big issue for me. The torture, the de-patterning that went on at Gitmo, that's a big problem with me. It was such an issue in 2008 that when they had the Democratic primary debates with Hillary and the Barack star and Joe Biden, every one of them up there said they were going to close Guantanamo Bay. No one did. And Barack Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, you want to make that a processing center. In other words, a place, if you can't ship them right away to process the Venezuelans, the Africans, whatever, for like a couple weeks, I'm fine with that. I don't want to set up any new prisons or black sites because who's to say who eventually gets sent there? We already have a myriad of people there. And if we are so concerned about, say, the worst of the worst, the heavy criminals, let's reopen Alcatraz. I'm fine with that, just off the coast. We could put the most violent there. I'm not into unaccountable black military sites because, like you said, the government is extremely corrupt and can utilize that in a multitude of ways. What's your take on Gitmo and how should it be utilized if it is being utilized in this immigration fight?
Okay, so I have 2 different takes. The first take is I applaud Donald Trump for doing that because I want your audience to understand for my whole career and beyond, when you got a violent rapist, a pedophile, drug dealer, whatever, and their home country would not take them back, you know what our presidents would do? They'd release them into our society. Release them into our society. So Donald Trump saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to house them in Guantanamo, until I can have those home countries bend a knee, like Venezuela bent a knee. They're taken back. It'll take Donald Trump time. It won't take him years. It'll take him weeks, but he has a site. Now, I'm going to step out and just say, I don't have any evidence to prove this, but my gut says there's something more to Guantanamo than sending illegal aliens there. I just do. Catherine Heritage doesn't show up and takes a picture in front of Guantanamo for illegal aliens. I don't buy it. Something else is going on. I don't know. And I don't know what that is. My gut says, and I always go off of my gut, that something else is happening that we don't have information to. But I do believe, Jason, more than anything, right now, Americans need 100% transparency. 100%. If it doesn't affect some kind of handler or law enforcement entity, that has to be transparent. And there has to be punishment once that transparency is brought out to light and we're like, okay, well, that guy's the criminal, then I need that guy to be arrested, given the constitutional rights, go see a judge and a jury. And if he's guilty or she's guilty of treason, there's a level of punishment. And if it's so severe that you brought 30 million people in, like Alejandro Mayorkas, I want him convicted. And when he's convicted of treason, I want him put to death. Period.
Well, this is what I've always said about and by the way, I think we're a long way away from actual criminal trials. And, treason's going to, not that it hasn't occurred. Like I said, it's been happening for a very long time. But I wouldn't even give them the pleasure of a quick death. I've always had this kind of vision in my mind that we do build a supermax prison and it is just 24/7 surveillance. So there are cameras everywhere. And if you get convicted and you're put into this special spot, I can log on to the internet at like 2:30 in the morning and I can watch Dick Cheney crying on a toilet, in his little cell. I think really that's the way to go, is you give these people exactly what they wanted to give us, which is a total authoritarian surveillance prison state, only they get it nice and confined. In a supermax that we can all enjoy. Just saying. I mean, I get it. A lot of people want to see the gallows. I'd rather not. I'd rather see him, pump out another 15, 20 years in a cell. Just my opinion.
We're dealing with evil, and evil has to be dealt with strongly.
I'm just, for me, I hope, JJ, for my life, that I'm never going to have to take another life. Now, I'm not saying there aren't positions, like you said, your family, your country, your property, where that might not arise. I just hope that we don't have to take it there. And I've always seen the large social change come through nonviolent protest. And that's why I've had so much respect for MLK and people like him in the past. And really, my generation has never seen another figure like that. So that's a good way to segue before we go to the last break. What do you expect from these assassination files? Because just like you, I'm extremely skeptical when it's going to go through the hands of government entities or individuals. And on the JFK files alone that Trump promised us twice and did not deliver on, magically they just found 2,000 more documents that supposedly not even the Warren Commission had. Well, then, the Warren Commission didn't have them. And Trump's guys didn't get to look at them last time. Where have they been? In the David Blaine abyss? We're going to talk about those documents and much more. Final segment of Making Sense of the Madness after this. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and it's with somewhat of a heavy heart that I come to you with the news that Making Sense of the Madness is changing and will hopefully be staying alive in some form. If you followed my work, you know that I've always said I am extremely lucky whenever I have a paid gig. Well, after 3 years, I no longer have any paid gigs. So when you look at Making Sense of the Madness, the format is going to change, where you're going to be able to watch a more commentary-driven show live on my socials, YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin, and X first and live, and then it will be carried by Patriot.tv. Now, unfortunately, this is going to mean that some of the very high caliber guests that I've gotten in the past will no longer be joining us. And once again, the format is changing. We are hoping that there is somebody out there that wants to sponsor the show and bring it back until its full form. But until then, please consider the links down below if you're watching this live or over on my socials. Thank you so much. And we are back with J.J. Carroll. The book is Treason, the Biden Administration's Strategic and Malicious Destruction of America's Sovereignty. So let's get into the documents.
Okay.
Love the executive order. I mean, we could have gotten into a lot of the executive orders that I think on its face sound great. At the same time, like you said, why does this need to go through a commission? Why are we seeing 2,000 magic documents? And really my biggest fear is the revelation from Snowden that I think was the most important and most people totally missed. Most people were fixated on, oh my God, they're spying on the American people. And I'm like, if you were paying attention, yeah, that's way before Snowden. We knew about Norris Insight Systems through Hepting versus AT&T going back to the 90s. We've had software like Promise and Carnivore where they're clearly intercepting all of our communications, again, since the mid-90s. So this is not new. When he revealed that he was looking at a document where most of the time you would see redactions from a document in the classified form and then an unclassified one. He talked about on the Rogan podcast that he saw a document that was completely fake. And then the real document was underneath. So it wasn't redactions. It was a substitute document. What's to say that they're not just going to give us Johnny nonsense and fakes in light of the Smith-Mund Modernization Act and God knows what else justification?
I don't think you can trust our government. I don't think you. This is what I think is the greatest sin of the people that have been leading our country for probably the last since Woodrow Wilson, 1913s, is that they now make everyone question everything. So when we finally get the Epstein logs or pictures, documents, whatever, JFK, we're all going to say, is that all of it? Is that really the truth? That's the greatest sin they did. And when you talk about, I like to just talk about the evidence, because you're absolutely right. This is what evidence rooms look like. You don't get just to walk in. You have to have someone walk in with you. You sign ledgers, not like typing in your handwriting when you leave to the minute, not rounding off. Oh, it's 11. No. It's 10:58. Okay, that's what you do. To say that you just stumbled across 2,000 pieces of evidence. Oh my God, look at, we didn't even know it was there. It was behind, somebody put a curtain over there and we didn't see it. Do you see how absurd that is? That's absurd. Absolutely absurd. And I'm talking about a guy that saw and oversaw a station evidence room, and then a sector evidence room. We're talking about the FBI. There's cameras everywhere. People are not wandering in there. You can't just wander in and wander out. It's heavily regulated. So the idea that our government just misplaced stuff, if you believe that, you're an idiot and you deserve just to get the life that you get. But to your point, when this stuff comes out, that just validates everything that we believe, that our government's a bunch of lying fools. That's it. It's not there's some incompetency, but the rulers are actively depending on the incompetency of the lower echelon. We're ruled. We don't live in the same republic that our founding fathers created. We've bastardized it. Look what they did to the 17th Amendment. Look what they're doing with birthright citizenship. That just because you drop your baby on the dusty border trail, you're a U.S. citizen. You know how absurd that is? If you can read past the second grade level, you can look at the Constitution and go, well, no, the birthright citizens, you can't just have a baby. It's a two-pronged system. We have been propagandized and lied to for decades and decades. I don't trust anything or anybody. I listen to people sometimes that I think, okay, I have some respect for them. They're pretty smart. And then I listen to them talk about immigration law or birthright citizenship, and I go, they're just a talking head. They're an idiot. If they don't know about this, what else are they lying about, right? And that's the point that I have a 13-year-old son. I tell him every day, son, don't trust anyone. No one. No one. You question everything and you get verification until you get the truth. Period, son. The world is filled with liars. Yeah. I hate to be that way, but my son's not going to be a moron. He's going to walk through life and he's going to dominate life because he's going to know that he's being lied to by everybody. And I am actually factually truth and honest. Anyone else wants to debate me, and then tell me what your government's done well for you and say the last decade. Go ahead, I'm waiting. Tell me one thing they have done that has benefited you. Go ahead. I'm waiting. And we sit here in silence.
I help take care of my 14 and 15-year-old nieces, and I've been doing this for a very long time. But at the same time, I've kept, my political views, other than the most extreme things when I hear something that's absurd, to myself. However, now we're starting to get into current events, and I find myself with my 14-year-old niece all the time having to tell her stuff. For instance, the immigration issue. The first thing that really caught my ear this year was, I just had to do a report that Donald Trump is going after people in churches and schools and hospitals. And I had to stop her. And I said, sweetheart, you have to understand that over the last 4 years, they've literally, she knows I travel a lot. I go, they've literally been shipping people in over the border and flying them in illegal. And she's looking at me like, what? I go, do you know how many times my flights were stopped? I showed her a picture. And I went there, and she's like, well, why don't I know about this? I go, because you cannot trust what's on the television. And I go, quite frankly, your teacher's probably a moron. I go, I hate to say it like that. I go, but I would debate any of your teachers or administration in your school on any subject at the thing of a hat, I'd make them look like an idiot because they're extremely uninformed. And I hate to say it like that, but a lot of people are uninformed. So I think, number one, it starts at home for sure. Number two, even with this administration, I'm no cheerleader for anybody. I think they've made some great calls. There's certainly some things that I'm worried about. We get into the cartel executive order. On its face, just like the free speech one, it sounds great. But what does that mean when our government, in the form of the CIA or assets, are also dealing drugs? Are we terrorists now as well? Like, I've got to see some discernment, and I've got to see some real, criminal accountability to make that real for me. It sounds great on its surface, because I don't like the cartels either. But we're going back, further than Barry Seal style, right? I mean, that's the thing that people don't realize. So I guess we got a few minutes left. What are your thoughts on that executive order in particular? How do you make that one against the cartels a reality when intrinsically you obviously have not only government operatives, but Western power structures backing those cartels as well?
Well, I think you have to go, if you're going to do it, you have to go all in. You can't half-ass this. It's already been documented that Ukraine has sold back our military-grade weapons to the cartels, Hamas, but to the Mexican drug cartels, since we're talking about them. So they have military-grade weapons. You can't send in SEAL Team 6 and a couple other groups. No. You need to go in there and firebomb them. You just have to. You have to eradicate their demons. You have to eradicate them. I dealt with them for 24 years. They're disgusting human beings. However, as much as I would sign up to go kill them in a battle within the constitutional constraints of law, I would be more than happy to do that again. However, why do those demons supply us with cheap labor, children to rape, hard narcotics to digest? Why do they do that? Because they're hoping that we buy it? Or is it because we're demanding it? America's demanding everything they're bringing to us. So before we get into this moral, this moral argument, how about we all in America stand in front of a mirror and take a good hard look at ourselves? Number one consumer of child pornography in the world, America. Number one producer and exporter of pornography in the world, America. Number one consumer of hard narcotics, America. One of the top nations on planet Earth that physically pays money to rape children, America. The cartels are nothing different than Amazon. They're just more violent. That's it. They're supplying what we're ordering. I order a book. I order my book, Treason, from Amazon. I expect it on my doorstep in 2 days. I demand children to rape. I demand cheap labor. I demand hard narcotics. Well, the cartel is going to bring it right to my front door. Of course they are. We're talking about $1 trillion business between human and narcotic smuggling. $1 trillion. $1 trillion. You think those cartels are just going to close shop? Or are they going to fight tooth and nail? So that's the only way that we combat this is full on. If you're going to half-ass it, don't waste your time. But we have to do, and I hate to use this term because it's a liberal term, but we need a comprehensive platform. We need to attack from all sides because we have major, major problems in the United States of America because we allowed it to happen. We didn't get to this point overnight. It took us decades to get to where men can have babies and need tampons.
We could go on for another hour on that subject alone. The book is Treason, the Biden administration's strategic and malicious destruction of America's sovereignty. JJ Carroll, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you guys for watching this show right here on Patriot.tv, where the truth lives. Remember, this guide is not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and we will see you on the flip side.